Hey everybody, it's AJ's Personal Touch. How you doing today? I didn't turn on the other light that I normally do just because I'm reading, and I know not all of you actually watch me while I read. Um, so it's the day after I read last time, but I'm going to schedule it for later. I'm in the same clothes. I woke up with a very massive migraine today, so I just wanted to stay comfy, and I've got nowhere to go until tomorrow. So yeah. I just kept on my very comfy clothes that I can wear now because it's colder outside. This is a flannel nightgown that I had since I was, I don't know, 20s. I think I bought it in my 20s. And I couldn't wear it at the time because my stomach was way too big, even though it was the size that was supposed to fit me. And ever since I could wear it, I love it. I've worn it so much. Once I started losing weight, um, after my first gastric bypass, and I was able to put it on. For the longest time, I couldn't button it all the way down. And even now, even though I had gained some weight, I can still button it. I'm excited that I can still wear it, and it's like one of the most comfortable things I own. I do like to wear unbuttoned with something underneath it. I think that's because I was used to wearing it before I could actually button it. And plus, I've got buttons missing off in the bottom of it, which I need to find some just the right size. I don't care if it's the same color or not, and put some more buttons on it. It's one of my comfy things. And again, when it gets colder, if you see me in my blue sweater, that is way oversized for me. It's because it's comfy. It's what I wore at a larger size when I needed comfort. And it's still, there's just something about things that you've worn in and how comfy they feel. And when I don't feel well, that's what I want to be wearing. So, like I said, I started the day off with migraine. But now I can read. So I am back to read more Anna Karenina. Something tells me I forgot to mark. There we go. I didn't move my magnetic bookmarker. Like, we started with 13 before. Why am I on 13 again? I just kind of wanted to sit here and read ahead, but then I thought I might as well read. And I can put it up later and hopefully not get behind. So we are on Kahlua Honey. Trying to have the book pet her. She's weird like that. She tries to get the computer, my phone, anything, but just me. And pet her on her chin. I guess it's not strange. Our other cat does it too. One that looks just like her. They have a lot of the same mannerisms. So I guess maybe some of the same cat breeds have the same mannerisms. Blue. Mama's trying to do this. Please stop. Chapter 18. Although all Vronsky's inner life was absorbed in his passion, his external life unilaterally and inevitably followed along the old accustomed lines of his social and regimental ties and interests. The interests of his regiment took an important place in Vronsky's life, both because he was fond of the regiment and because the regiment was fond of him. They were not only fond of Vronsky and his regiment, they respected him too, and were proud of him, proud that this man, with his immense wealth, his brilliant education and abilities, and the path open before him to every kind of success, distinction, and ambition, had discarded all that and all of the interests of life, had the interests of his regiment and his comrades nearest to his heart. Vronsky was aware of his comrades' view of him, and in addition to his liking for the life, he had felt bound to keep up that reputation. It need not be said that he did not speak of his love to any of his comrades, nor did he betray his secret even in the wildest drinking bouts, though indeed he was never so drunk as to lose all control of himself. and he shut up any of his thoughtless comrades who attempted to allude to his connection. But in spite of that, his love was known to all the town. Everyone guessed with more or less confidence at his relations with Madame Karenina. The majority of the younger men envied him for just what was the most irksome factor in his love, the exalted position of Karenin and the consequent publicity of the connection in society. The greater number of the young women who envied Anna and had long been weary of hearing her called virtuous rejoiced at the fulfillment of their predictions and were only waiting for a decisive turn in public opinion to fall upon her with all the weight of their scorn. They were already making ready their handfuls of mud to fling at her when the right moment arrived. The greater number of the middle-aged people and certain great pers- personages were displeased at the prospect of the impending scandal in society. Vronsky's mother, on hearing of his connection, was at first pleased at it because nothing to her mind gave such a finishing touch to a brilliant young man as a liaison. In the highest society, she was pleased too. Madame Karenina, who had so taken her fancy and had talked so much of her son, was, after all, just like all other pretty and well-bred women, at least according to the Countess Vronskaya's ideas. But she had heard of late that her son had refused a position offered him of great importance to his career, simply in order to remain in the regiment where he could be constantly seeing Madame Karenina. She learned that great personages were displeased with him on this account, and she changed her opinion. She was vexed, too, that from all she could learn of his connection, it was not that brilliant, graceful, worldly liaison which she would have welcomed, but a sort of Wertherish, desperate passion, so she was told, which might well lead him into imprudence. She had not seen him since his abrupt departure from Moscow, and she sent her elder son to bid him come to see her. This elder son, too, was displeased with his younger brother. He did not distinguish what sort of love he might be, big or little, passionate or passionless, lasting or passing. He kept a ballet girl himself, though he was the father of a family, so he was lenient in these matters. But he knew that this love affair was viewed with displeasure by those whom it was necessary to please, and therefore he did not approve of his brother's conduct. Besides the service in society, Vronsky had another great interest, horses. He was passionately fond of horses. That year's races and steeplechase had been arranged for the officers. Vronsky had put his name down, bought a thoroughbred English mare, and in spite of his love affair, he was looking forward to the races with intense, though reserved excitement. These two passions did not interfere with one another. On the contrary, he needed occupation and distraction quite apart from his love, so as to recruit and rest himself from the violent emotions that agitated him. On the day of the races at Kranzo Selo, chapter 19. On the day of the races at Kranzo Selo, Vronsky had come earlier than usually to eat beefsteak in the common mess room of the regiment. He had no need to be strict with himself, as he had very quickly been brought down to the required light weight. But still, he had to avoid gaining flesh, and so he eschewed farinaceous and sweet dishes. He sat with his coat unbuttoned over a white waistcoat, resting his elbows on the table, and while waiting for the steak he had ordered, he looked at a French novel that lay open in the plate. He was only looking at the book to avoid conversation with the officers coming in and out. He was thinking. He was thinking of Anna's promise to see him that day after the races, but he had not seen her for 3 days, and as her husband had just returned from abroad, he did not know whether she would be able to meet him today or not, and he did not know how to find out. He had had his last interview with her at his cousin Betsy's summer villa. He visited the Karenin summer villa as rarely as possible. Now he wanted to go there, and he pondered the question how to do it. Of course I shall see Betsy. Has sent me to ask whether she's coming to the races. Of course I'll go, he decided. Lifting his head from the book, and as he vividly pictured the happiness of seeing her, his face lighted up. Send to my house and tell them to have out the carriage and 3 horses as quick as they can, he said to the servant, who handed him the steak on a hot silver dish. And moving the dish up, he began eating. From the billiard room next door came the sound of balls knocking, and talk and laughter. 2 officers appeared at the entrance door. One, a younger fellow with a feeble, delicate face, who had lately joined the regiment from the corps of pages. The other, a plump, elderly officer with a bracelet on his wrist and little eyes lost in fat. Vronsky glanced at them, frowned, and looking down at his book as though he had not noticed them, he proceeded to eat and read at the same time. What? Fortifying yourself for your work? Said the plump officer, sitting down beside him. As you see, responded Vronsky, knitting his brows, wiping his mouth, and not looking at the officer. So you're not afraid of getting fat? Said the latter, turning a chair round for the younger officer. What? Said Vronsky angrily, making a wry face of disgust and showing his even teeth. You're not afraid of getting fat? Waiter, sherry, said Vronsky, without replying, and moving the book to the other side of him, he went on reading. The plump officer took up the list of wines and turned to the young officer. You chose what were to drink, he said, handing him the card and looking. You choose what were to drink, he said, handing him the card and looking at him. Rhine wine, please, said the officer, stealing a timid glance at Vronsky and trying to pull his scarcely visible mustache. Seeing that Vronsky did not turn around, the younger officer got up. Let's go to the billiard room, he said. The plump officer rose submissively, and they moved towards the door. At that moment there walked into the room the tall and well-built Captain Yashvin. Nodding with an air of lofty contempt to the 2 officers, he went up to Vronsky. Ah, here he is, he cried, bringing his big hand down heavily on his epaulette. Vronsky looked round angrily, but his face lighted up immediately with the characteristic expression of genial and manly serenity. That's it, Alexei, said the captain in his loud baritone. You must just eat a mouthful now and drink only 1 tiny glass. Oh, I'm not hungry. There, go to the inseparables, Yashvin dropped, glancing sarcastically at the 2 officers who were at that instant leaving the room, and he bent his long legs, swathed in tight riding breeches, and sat down in the chair, too low for him, so that his knees were cramped up in a sharp angle. Why didn't you turn up at Red Theater yesterday? Numerova wasn't at all bad. Where were you? I was late at the Trubetskoys, said Vronsky. Ah, responded Yashvin. Yashvin, a gambler and a rake, a man not merely without moral principles, but of immoral principles. Yashvin was Vronsky's greatest friend in the regiment. Vronsky liked him both for his exceptional physical strength, which he showed for the most part by being able to drink like a fish, and to do without sleep without being in the slightest degree affected by it, and for his great strength of character, which he showed in his relations with his comrades and superior officers, commanding both fear and respect, and also at cards, when he would play for tens of thousands, and however much he might have drunk, he might have drunk. Always with sullen skill and decision, that he was reckoned the best player in the English club. Vronsky respected and liked Yashvin particularly because he felt Yashvin liked him, not for his name and his money, but for himself. And of all men, he was the only one with whom Vronsky would have liked to speak of his love. He felt that Yashvin, in spite of his apparent contempt for every sort of feeling, was the only man who could, so he fancied, comprehend the intense passion which now filled his whole life. Moreover, he felt certain that Yashvin, as it was, took no delight in gossip and scandal, and interpreted his feelings rightly. That is to say, knew and believed that his passion was not a jest, not a pastime, but something more serious and impatient. And important. Sorry, it looked like impatient, but it's important. So let me reread that. That is to say, knew and believed that the passion was not a jest, not a pastime, but something more serious and important. Vronsky had never spoken to him of his passion, but he was aware that he knew all about it and that he put the right interpretation on it, and he was glad to see that in his eyes. Ah, yes, he said to the announcement that Vronsky had been at the Tverskoy's, and his black eyes shining, he plucked at his left mustache and began twisting it into his mouth, a bad habit he had. Well, and what did you do yesterday? Win anything? Asked Vronsky. 8,000. But three don't count. He won't pay up. Oh, then you can afford to lose over me, said Vronsky, laughing. Yashvin had bet heavily on Vronsky in the races. No chance of my losing. Mahotin's the only one that's risky. And the conversation passed to forecasts of the coming race, the only thing Vronsky could think of just now. Come along, I'm finished, said Vronsky, and getting up, he went to the door. Yashvin got up too, stretching his long legs and his long back. It's too early for me to dine, but I must have a drink. I'll come along directly. High wine, he shouted in his rich voice that's always rang out so loudly at drill and set the windows shaking now. No, all right, he shouted again immediately after. You're going home, so I'll go with you. And he walked out with Vronsky. Chapter 20. Vronsky was staying in a roomy, clean Finnish hut, divided into two by a partition. Petrisky lived with him in camp too. Petrisky was asleep when Vronsky and Yashvin came into the hut. Get up, don't go on sleeping, said Yashvin, going behind the partition and giving Petrisky, who was lying with ruffled hair and with his nose in the pillow, a prod on his shoulder. Petrisky jumped up suddenly onto his knees and looked round. Your brother's been here, he said to Vronsky. He waked me up, damn him, and said he'd look in again. And pulling up the rug, he flung himself back on the pillow. Oh, do shut up, Yashvin, he said, getting furious with Yashvin, who was pulling the rug off him. Shut up. He turned over and opened his eyes. You'd better tell me what to drink. Such a nasty taste in my mouth, that. Brandy's better than anything, boomed Yashvin. Tereshchenko? Brandy for your master and cucumbers, he shouted, obviously taking pleasure in the sound of his own voice. Brandy, do you think, eh? Queried Petrisky's, blinking and rubbing his eyes. And you'll drink something. All right, then. We'll have a drink together. Vronsky, have a drink? Said Petrisky, getting up and wrapping the tiger skin rug round him. He went to the door of the partition. He went to the door of the partition wall, raised his hands, and hummed in French. There was a king in Thule. Vronsky, will you have a drink? Go along, said Vronsky, pulling on the coat his valet handed to him. Where are you off to? Asked Joshvin. Oh, here are your three horses, he added, seeing the carriage drive up. The stables, and I've got to see Bryansky too about the horses, said Vronsky. Vronsky had, as a fact, promised to call Bryansky's some 8 miles from Peterhof and to bring him some money owing for some horses, and he hoped to have time to get that in too. His comrades were at once aware that he was not only going there. Petrisky, still humming, winked and made a pout with his lips, as though he would say, "Oh yes, we know, you're Baranski." Mind you're not late, was Josephine's only comment, and to change the conversation. How's my roan? Is he doing all right? He inquired, looking out the window at the middle one of the three horses, which he had sold Vronsky. Stop, cried Petrusky to Vronsky as he was just going out. Your brother left a letter and a note for you. Wait a bit. Where are they? Vronsky stopped. Well, where are they? Where are they? That's just the question, said Petrusky solemnly, moving his forefinger upwards from his nose. Come, tell me, this is silly, said Vronsky, smiling. I have not lighted the fire. Here, somewhere about. Come, enough fooling. Where is the letter? No, I've forgotten, really. Or was it a dream? Wait a bit, wait a bit. But what's the use of getting in a rage? If you'd drunk 4 bottles yesterday, as I did, you'd forget where you were lying. Wait a bit. I'll remember. Petrusky went behind the partition and lay down on his bed. Wait a bit. That was how I was lying, and this was how he was standing. Yes, yes, yes. Here it is, said Petrusky, pulled a letter out from under the mattress where he had hidden it. Vronsky took the letter and his brother's note. It was the letter he was expecting from his mother, reproaching him for not having been to see her, and the note was from his brother to say that he must have a little talk with him. Vronsky knew that it was all about the same thing. What business is it of theirs, thought Vronsky, and crumpling up the letters, he thrust them between the buttons of his coat so as to read them carefully on the road. In the porch of the hut he was met by 2 officers, one of his regiment and one of another. Vronsky's quarters were always a meeting place for all of the officers. Where are you off to? I must go to Peterhof. Has the mayor come from Charkow? Yes, but I've not seen her yet. They say Mahotin's gladiator's lame. Nonsense. But however you going to race in the mud, said the other. Here are my saviors, cried Petrusky. Seeing them come in, before him stood the orderly with a tray of brandy and salted cucumbers. Here's Yashvin's ordered me to drink a pick-me-up. Well, you did give it to us yesterday, said one of those who had come in. You didn't let us get a wink of sleep all night. Oh, didn't we make a pretty finish, said Petrusky. Volkov climbed onto the roof and began telling us how he was. I said, let's have music. The funeral march? He fairly dropped asleep on the roof over the funeral march. Drink it up. You positively must drink the brandy, and then seltzer water and a lot of lemon, said Yashvin, standing over to Petrusky. Sorry about the break. The cat walked over my laptop and turned off the video. So let me get back to where I was. And also, I want to apologize. I do still have a slight migraine left, and sometimes I get a glare over the words and I can't see them well. So that's why I'm having to go back over it more. If you guys ever feel that the reading is not well enough, just let me know and I will go back and reread the chapters. I thought of doing that right now, but I just want to keep going on. But if this is not good enough, let me know and I will go back and reread these chapters. Drink it up. You positively must drink the brandy, and then seltzer water and a lot of lemon, said Yashvin, standing over Petrusky like a mother making a child take medicine. And then a little champagne, just a small bottle. Come, there's some sense in that. Stop a bit, Vronsky. We'll all have a drink. No, goodbye, all of you. I'm not going to drink today. Why, are you gaining weight? All right, then, we must have it alone. Give us the seltzer, water, and lemon. Vronsky, shouted someone when he was already outside. Well, you'd better get your hair cut. It'll weigh you down, especially at the top. Vronsky was in fact beginning prematurely to get a little bald. He laughed gaily, showing his even teeth, pulling his cap over the thin place, went out and got into his carriage. To the stables, he said, and was just pulling out the letters to read them through. But he thought better of it and put off reading them so as not to distract his attention before looking at the mare. Later. Chapter 21. The temporary stable, a wooden shed, had been put up close to the racecourse, and there his mare was to have been taken the previous day. He had not yet seen her there. During the last few days, he had not ridden her out for exercise himself, but had put her in charge of the trainer, and so now he positively did not know in what condition his mare had arrived yesterday and was today. He had scarcely got out of his carriage when his groom, the so-called stable boy, recognizing the carriage some way off, called the trainer, a dry-looking Englishman in high boots and a short jacket, clean-shaven except for a tuft below his chin, came to meet him, walking with the uncouth gait of a jockey, turning his elbows out and swaying from side to side. "Well, how's Frou Frou?" Vronsky asked in English. "All right, sir," the Englishman's voice responded, somewhere in the inside of his throat. "Better not go in," he added, touching his hat. "I've put a muzzle on her, and the mare's fidgety. Better not go in, it'll excite the mare." "No, I'm going in. I want to look at her." "Come along, then," said the Englishman, frowning and speaking with his mouth shut. And with swinging elbows, he went on in front with his disjointed gait. They went into the little yard in front of the shed. A stable boy, spruce and smart in his holiday attire, met them with a broom in his hand and followed them. In the shed there were 5 horses in their separate stalls, and Vronsky knew that his chief rival, Gladiator, a very tall chestnut horse, had been brought there and must be standing among them. Even more than his mare, Vronsky longed to see Gladiator, whom he had never seen. But he knew that by the etiquette of the race course, it was not merely impossible for him to see the horse, but improper even to ask questions about him. Just as he was passing along the passage, the boy opened the door into the second horse box on the left, and Vronsky caught a glimpse of a big chestnut horse with white legs. He knew that was Gladiator, but with the feeling of a man turning away from the sight of another man's open letter, he turned round and went into Frou Frou's stall. "The horse in here belongs to Mac. Mac. I never can say the name," said the Englishman over his shoulder, pointing to his big finger and dirty nail towards Gladiator's stall. "Mahotin? Yes, he's my most serious rival," said Vronsky. "If you are riding him," said the Englishman, "I'd bet on you." "Frou Frou's more nervous. He's stronger," said Vronsky, smiling at the compliment to his riding. "In a steeplechase, it all depends on riding and on pluck," said the Englishman. "Of pluck, that is energy and courage." Vronsky did not merely feel that he had enough, that was of far more importance. He was firmly convinced that no one in the world could have more of this pluck than he had. "Don't you think I want more thinning down?" "Oh, no," answered the Englishman. "Please don't speak loud. The mare's fidgety," he added, nodding towards the horse's box before which they were standing, and from which came the sound of restless stamping in the straw. He opened the door, and Vronsky went into the horse box. Dimly lighted by one little window in the horse box stood a dark bay mare with the muzzle on, picking at the fresh straw with her hoofs. Looking round him in the twilight of the horse box, Vronsky unconsciously took in once more in the comprehensive glance all the points of his favorite mare. Frou Frou was a beast of medium size, not altogether free from reproach from a breeder's point of view. She was small-boned all over, though her chest was extremely prominent in front. It was narrow. Her hind quarters were a little drooping, and in her fore legs, and still more in her hind legs, there were a noticeable curvature. The muscles of both hind and fore legs were not very thick, but across her shoulders the mare was exceptionally broad, especially striking now that she was lean from training. The bones of her legs below the knees looked no thicker than a finger from in front, but were extraordinarily thick seen from the side. She looked altogether, except across the shoulders, as it were, pinched in at the sides and pressed out in depth. But she had in the highest degree the quality that makes all defects forgotten, that Quality was blood, and blood that tells, as the English expression has it. The muscles stood up sharply under the network of sinews, covered with a delicate, mobile skin, soft as satin, and they were hard as bone. Her clean-cut head, with prominent, bright, spirited eyes, broadened out at the open nostrils and showed the red blood in the cartilage within. About all her figure, and especially her head, there was a certain expression of energy, and at the same time of softness. She was one of those creatures which seem only not to speak because the mechanism of their mouth does not allow them to. To Vronsky, at any rate, it seemed that she understood all he felt at that moment looking at her. Directly Vronsky went towards her, she drew in a deep breath, and turning back her prominent eye till the white looked bloodshot, she started at the approaching figures from the opposite side, shaking her muzzle and shifting slightly from one leg to the other. "There, you see how fidgety she is," said the Englishman. "That's darling. There," said Vronsky, going up to the mare and speaking soothingly to her. But the nearer he came, the more excited she grew. Only when he stood by her head, she was suddenly quieter, while the muscles quivered under her soft, delicate coat. Vronsky patted her strong neck, straightened over her sharp withers a stray lock of her mane, and had fallen on the other side, and moved his face near her dilated nostrils, transparent as a bat's wing. She drew a loud breath and snorted out through her tense nostrils, started, pricked up her sharp ear, and put out her strong black lip towards Vronsky, as though she would nip hold of his sleeve. But remembering the muzzle, she shook it, and again began restlessly stamping one after the other her shapely legs. "Quiet, darling, quiet," he said, patting her again over her hindquarters, and with a glad sense that his mare was in the best possible condition, he went out he went out of the horse box. The mare's excitement had infected Vronsky. He felt that his heart was throbbing, and that he too, like the mare, longed to move, to bite. It was both dreadful and delicious. "Well, I rely on you then," he said to the Englishman. "6:30 on the ground." "All right," said the Englishman. "Oh, where are you going, my lord?" he asked suddenly, using the title "my lord," which had scarcely ever used before. Vronsky in amazement raised his head and stared, as he knew how to stare, not into the Englishman's eyes, but at his forehead, astounded at the impertinence of his question, but realizing that in asking this, the Englishman had been looking at him not as an employer, but as a jockey. He answered, "I've got to go to Bryansky's. I shall be home within an hour." "How often I'm asked that question today," he said to himself. And he blushed, a thing which rarely happened to him. The Englishman looked gravely at him, and as though he too knew where Vronsky was going, he added, "The great thing's to keep quiet before a race," he said. "Don't get out of temper or upset about anything." "All right," answered Vronsky, smiling, and jumping into his carriage, he told the man to drive to Peterhof. Before he had driven many paces away, the dark clouds that had been threatening rain all day broke, and there was a heavy downpour of rain. "What a pity," thought Vronsky, putting up the roof of the carriage. "It was muddy before, and now it will be a perfect swamp." As he sat in solitude in the closed carriage, he took out his mother's letter and his brother's note and read them through. Yes, it was the same thing over and over again. Everyone, his mother, his brother, everyone thought fit to interfere in the affairs of his heart. This interference acu- this interference aroused in him a feeling of angry hatred, a feeling he had rarely known before. What business is it of theirs? Why does everybody feel called upon to concern himself about me? And why do they worry me so? Just because they see that this is something they can't understand. If it were a common, vulgar, worldly intrigue, they would have left me alone. They feel that this is something different, and this is not a mere pastime, and this woman is dearer to me than life, and this is incomprehensible, and that's why it annoys them. Whatever our destiny is, or maybe we have made it ourselves, and we do not complain of it, he said, in the word we, linking himself with Anna. No, they must needs teach us how to live. They haven't an idea of what happiness is. They don't know that without our love for us, there is neither happiness nor unhappiness, no life at all, he thought. He was angry with all of them for the interference, just because he felt in his soul that all these people, were right. He felt that the love that bound him to Anna was not a momentary impulse, which would pass, as worldly intrigues do pass, leaving no other traces in the life of either but pleasant or unpleasant memories. He felt all the torture of his own and her position, all the difficulty there was for them, conspicuous as they were in the eye of all the world, in concealing their love, in lying, deceiving, feigning, and continually thinking of others, when the passion that united them was so intense that they were both oblivious of everything else but their love. He vividly recalled all the constantly recurring instances of inevitable necessity for lying and deceit, which were so against his natural bent. He recalled particularly vividly the shame he had more than once detected in her at the necessity for lying and deceit, and he experienced the strange feeling that had sometimes come upon him since his secret love for Anna. This was a feeling of loathing for something, whether for Alexey Alexandrovitch or for himself or for the whole world. He could not have said, but he always drove away this strange feeling. Now, too, he shook it off and continued the thread of his thought. She was unhappy. Yes, she was unhappy before, but proud and at peace. And now she cannot be at peace and feel secure in her dignity, though she does not show it. Yes, we must put an end to it, he decided. And for the first time, the idea clearly presented itself that it was essential to put an end to this false position, and the sooner the better. Throw up everything, she and I, and hide ourselves somewhere alone with our love, he said to himself. Chapter 22. Chapter 22. The rain did not last long, and by the time Vronsky arrived, his shaft horse trotting at full speed and dragging the trace horses galloping through the mud with their reins hanging loose, the sun had peeped out again. The roofs of the summer villas and the old lime trees in the gardens on both sides of the principal streets sparkled with wet brilliance, and from the twigs came a pleasant drip, and from the roofs rushing streams of water. He thought no more of this shower spoiling the race course, but was rejoicing now that, thanks to the rain, he would be sure to find her at home and alone, as he knew that Alexey Alexandrovitch, who had lately returned from a foreign watering place, had not moved from Petersburg. Hoping to find her alone, Vronsky alighted as he always did to avoid attracting attention before crossing the bridge and walked to the house. He did not go up the steps to the street door, but went into the court. "Has your master come?" he asked the gardener. "No, sir. The mistress is at home." "But will you please go to the front door? There are servants there," the gardener answered. "They'll open the door." "No, I'll go in from the garden." and feeling satisfied that she was alone and wanting to take her by surprise, since he had not promised to be there today, and she would certainly not expect him to come before the races, he walked, holding his sword and stepping cautiously over the sandy path bordered with flowers to the terrace, and looked out upon the garden. Vronsky forgot now all that he had thought on the way of the hardships and difficulties of their position. He thought of nothing but that he would see her directly, not in imagination, but living, all of her, as she was in reality. He was just going in, stepping on his whole foot so as not to creak up the worn steps of the terrace, when he suddenly remembered what he always forgot, and what caused the most torturing side of his relations with her, her son, with his questioning, hostile, as he fancied, eyes. This boy was more often than any one else a check upon their freedom. When he was present, both Vronsky and Anna did not merely avoid speaking of anything that they could not have repeated before everyone, they did not even allow themselves to refer by hints to anything the boy did not understand. They had made no arrangement about this, it had settled itself. They would have felt it wounding themselves to deceive the child. In his presence, they talked like acquaintances. But in spite of this caution, Vronsky often saw the child's intent, bewildered glance fixed upon him, and a strange shyness, uncertainly at one time friendly, and a strange shyness, uncertainly at one time friendliness, at another coldness and reserve in the boy's manner to him, as though the child felt that between this man and his mother there existed some important bond, the significance of which he could not understand. As a fact, the boy did feel that he could not understand this relation, and he tried painfully, and was not able to make clear to himself what feeling he ought to have for this man. With a child's keen instinct for every manifestation of feeling, he saw distinctly that his father, his governess, his nurse, all did not merely dislike Vronsky, but looked on him with horror and aversion, though they never said anything about him, while his mother looked on him as her greatest friend. What does it mean? Who is he? How ought I to love him? If I don't know, it's my fault. Either I'm stupid or a naughty boy, thought the child. And this was what caused his dubious, inquiring, sometimes hostile expression, and the shyness and uncertainty which Vronsky found so irksome. This child's presence always and infallibly called up in Vronsky that strange feeling of inexplicable loathing which he had experienced of late. The child's presence called upon both in Vronsky and in Anna a feeling akin to the feeling of a sailor who sees by the compass, and that direction in which he is swiftly moving is far from the right one, but that to arrest his motion is not in his power, and that every instant is carrying him farther and farther away, and that to admit to himself his devotion from the right direction is the same as admitting his certain ruin. This child, with his innocent outlook upon life, with the compass that showed him the point to which they had departed from what they knew but did not want to know. This time Seryoza was not at home, and she was completely alone. She was sitting on the terrace waiting for the return of her son, who had gone out for his walk and been caught in the rain. She had sent a manservant and a maid out to look for him. Dressed in a white gown, deeply embroidered, she was sitting in the corner of the terrace behind some flowers, and did not hear him. Bending her curly black head, she pressed her forehead against a cool watering pot that stood on the parapet, and both her lovely hands, with the ring she knew so well, clasped the pot. The beauty of her whole figure, her head, her neck, her hands, struck Vronsky every time as something new and unexpected. He stood still, gazing at her in ecstasy. But directly he would have made a step to come nearer to her, she was aware of his presence, pushed away the watering pot, and turned her flushed face towards him. "What's the matter? You are ill?" she said in her French, going up to her. He would have run to her, but remembering that there might be spectators, he looked round towards the balcony door and reddened a little, as he always reddened, feeling that he had to be afraid and and to be on his guard. "No, I'm quite well," she said, getting up and pressing his outstretched hand tightly. "I did not expect thee." "Mercy, what cold hands," he said. "You startled me," she said. "I'm alone and expecting Seryoza. He's out for a walk. They'll come in from this side." But in spite of her efforts to be calm, her lips were quivering. "Forgive me for coming, but I couldn't pass the day without seeing you," he went on, speaking French as he always did to avoid using the stiff Russian plural form, so impossibly frigid between them, and the dangerously intimate singular. "Forgive you. I'm so glad." "But you're ill or worried," he went on, not letting go of her hands and bending over her. "What were you thinking of?" "Always at the same thing," she said with a smile. She spoke the truth. If ever, at any moment, she had been asked what she was thinking of, she could have answered truly, the same thing, of her happiness and her unhappiness. She was thinking, just when he came upon her, of this. Why was it? And wondered that to others, to Betsy, she knew of her secret connection with Tushkevich, it was all easy, while to her it was such torture. Today the thought gained special poignancy from certain other considerations. She asked him about the races. He answered her questions, and seeing that she was agitated, trying to calm her, he began telling her in the simplest tone the details of his preparations for the races. Tell him or not tell him, she thought, looking into his quiet, affectionate eyes. He is so happy, so absorbed in his races, that he won't understand as he ought. He won't understand all the gravity of this fact to us. "But you haven't told me what you were thinking of when I came in," he said, interrupting his narrative. "Please tell me." She did not answer, and bending her head a little, she looked inquiring at him from under her brows, her eyes shining under their long lashes. Her hand shook as if played with the leaf she had picked. He saw it, and his face expressed the utter subjection, the slavish devotion which he had done so much to win her. "I see something has happened. Do you suppress I can be at peace knowing you have a trouble I am not sharing?" "Tell me, for God's sake," he repeated imploringly. "Yes, I shan't be able to forgive him if he does not realize all the gravity of it. Better not tell. Why put him to the proof?" she thought, still staring at him in the same way, and feeling the hand that held the leaf was trembling more and more. "For God's sake," he repeated, taking her hand. "Shall I tell you? Yes, yes, yes." "I'm with child," she said softly and deliberately. The leaf in her hand shook more violently, but she did not take her eyes off him, watching how he would take it. He turned white, would have said something, but stopped. He dropped her hand, and his head sank on his breast. Yes, he realizes all the gravity of it, she thought, and gratefully she pressed his hand. But she was mistaken in thinking he realized the gravity of the fact as she, a woman, realized it. On hearing it, he felt come upon him with tenfold intensity and strange feeling of loathing of someone, but at the same time he felt that the turning point he had been longing for had come now, that it was impossible to go on concealing things from her husband, and it was inevitable to go on con- it's the same thing from her husband, and it was inevitable in one way or another that they should soon put an end to their unnatural position. But besides that, her emotion physically affected him in the same way. He looked at her with a look of submissive tenderness, kissed her hand, got up, and in silence paced up and down the terrace. "Yes," he said, going up to her resolutely, "neither you nor I have looked on our relations as a passing amusement, and now our fate is sealed. It is absolutely necessary to put an end," he looked round as he spoke, "to the deception in which we are living. Put an end. How put an end, Alexei, she said softly. She was calmer now, and her face lighted up with a tender smile. Leave your husband and make our life one. It is one as it is, she answered, scarcely audibly. Yes, but altogether, altogether. But how, Alexei, tell me how? She said in a melancholy mockery at the hopelessness of her own position. Is there any way out of such a position? Am I not the wife of my husband? There is a way out of every position. We must take our line, he said. Anything's better than the position in which you're living. Of course, I see how you torture yourself over everything, the world and your son and your husband. Oh, not over my husband, she said with a quiet smile. I don't know him. I don't think of him. He doesn't exist. You're not speaking sincerely. I know you. You worry about him too. Oh, he doesn't even know, she said, and suddenly a hot flash came over her face, her cheeks, her brow, her neck crimsoned, and tears of shame came into her eyes. But we won't talk of him. Chapter 23. Vronsky had several times already, though not resolutely as now, tried to bring her to consider their position, and every time he had been confronted by the same superficiality and triviality with which she met his appeal now. It was as though there were something in this which she could not or would not face, as though directly she began to speak of this, she, the real Anna, retreated somehow into herself, and another strange and unaccountable woman came out, whom he did not love and whom he feared, and who was in opposition to him. But today he was resolved to have it out. Whether he knows or not, said Vronsky in his usual quiet and resolute tone, there's nothing to do with us. You cannot stay like this, especially now. What's to be done, according to you? She asked with the same frivolous irony. She, who had so feared he would take her condition too lightly, was now vexed with him for deducing from it the necessity of taking some step. Tell him everything and leave him. Very well, let us suppose I do that, she said. Do you know what the result of that would be? I can tell you it all beforehand. And a wicked light gleamed in her eyes that had been so soft a minute before. You love another man and have entered into criminal intrigues with him? Mimicking her husband, she threw an emphasis on the word criminal, as Alexey Alexandrovitch did. I warned you of the results in the religious, the civil, and the domestic relation. You have not listened to me. Now I cannot let you disgrace my name and my son. She had meant to say, but about her son she could not just. Disgrace my name and more in the same style, she added. In general terms, he'll say in his official manner and with all distinctness and precision that he cannot let me go, but will take all measures in his power to prevent scandal, and he will calmly and punctually act in accordance with his words. That's what will happen. He's not a man, but a machine, and a spiteful machine when he's angry, she added, recalling Alexey Alexandrovitch as she spoke, with all the peculiarities of his figure and manner of speaking, and reckoning against him every defect she could find in him, softening nothing for the great wrong she herself was doing him. But Anna, said Vronsky in a soft and persuasive voice, trying to soothe her, we absolutely must. Anyway, tell him. And then by the line. Sorry, I thought I paused the recording accidentally. What? Run away? And why not run away? I don't see how we can keep on like this, and not for my sake. I see that you suffer. Yes, run away and become your mistress, she said angrily. Anna, he said with reproachful tenderness. Yes, she went on. Become your mistress and complete the ruin of. Again she would have said my son, but she could not utter that word. Vronsky could not understand how she, with her strong and truthful nature, could endure this state of deceit and not long to get out of it. but she did not suspect that the chief cause of it was the word son, which she could not bring herself to pronounce. He did not suspect, not she. When she thought of her son and his future attitude to his mother, who had abandoned his father, she felt such terror at what she had done, and that she could not face it. But like a woman, she could only try to comfort herself with lying assurance that everything would remain as it always had been, and that it was possible to forget the fearful question of how it would be with her son. I beg you, I entreat you, she said suddenly, taking his hand and speaking in quite a different tone, sincere and tender. Never speak to me of that. But Anna, never. Leave it to me. I know all the baseness, all the horror of my position. But it's not so easy to arrange as you think. And leave it to me, and do what I say. Never speak to me of it. Do you promise me? No, no, promise. I promise everything, but I can't be at peace, especially after what you have told me. I can't be at peace when you can't be at peace. I? She repeated. Yes, I am worried sometimes, but that will pass. If you will never talk about this, when you talk about it, it's only then it worries me. I don't understand, he said. I know, she interrupted him, how hard it is for your truthful nature to lie, and I grieve for you. I often think that you have ruined your whole life for me. I was just thinking the very same thing, he said. How could you sacrifice everything for my sake? I can't forgive myself, and that you're unhappy. I unhappy, she said, coming closer to him and looking at him with an ecstatic smile of love. I am like a hungry man who has been given food. He may be cold and dressed in rags and ashamed, but he is not unhappy. I unhappy? No, this is my unhappiness. She could hear the sound of her son's voice coming towards them, and glancing swiftly round the terrace, she got up impulsively. Her eyes glowed with the fire he knew so well. With a rapid movement, she raised her lovely hands, covered with rings, took his head, looked a long look into his face, and putting up her face with smiling parted lips, swiftly kissed his mouth and both eyes and pushed him away. She would have gone, but he held her back. When? He murmured in a whisper, gazing in ecstasy at her. Tonight at 1 o'clock, she whispered, and with a heavy sigh, she walked with her light, swift step to meet her son. Sir Yoiza had been caught by the rain in the big garden, and he and his nurse had taken shelter in an arbor. Well, au revoir, she said to Vronsky. I must soon be getting ready for the races. Betsy promised to fetch me. Vronsky, looking at his watch, went away hurriedly. I'm going to stop there. Did have to pause for a minute because I had some eggs hard boiling and I needed to get them off before the water all evaporated. So, what are you guys thinking? When I read the chapter where she told him that she was pregnant, couldn't you tell before she said it that's what she was going to say? I'm with child. I knew it. I knew it. I knew it. I knew it. It's getting really, really good. I want to say I watched the movie before, but I don't remember it now. Not like this. So, if I did, it was completely different. I'm thinking that I waited because I wanted to read the book. I might have to go watch it. Go find it and watch it. I don't know. I don't want it to ruin the rest of the book. I mean, we are only, like I said before, about a fourth of the way through. Look at how big that is. Mm, mm, mm. Let me know what you think below. And I will be back again on another day. Hopefully I can splice this together fine and I don't have to reread all of it. But if I do, I will. And with that, I am out of here. Have a great day. Rest of your day, evening, night. It's 8:37 now. I have got to go get my dinner together so that I can eat. Remember, you matter. And remember, you are beautiful, you are gorgeous, you're handsome, whichever one you like better. So, with that, I am out of here. Later.